I remember sitting there getting ready for the procedure, and I had a lady saying to me, "Oh, you live in the area near me. Do you know where there is a good place to go get a good spray tan?" Oh, God. I'm about to have a curette. I can't wait to tell my daughter that I met you today. Really? Are we discussing that out of school? Are we? I couldn't even speak. I was so...
You must have felt so vulnerable.
Vulnerable and shocked. And like, okay, you're going to discuss this over dinner with your mates?
Yeah.
Like,
because of course. Guess who came in today.
Exactly.
From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman, and welcome to the No Filter podcast. The first time I ever saw Meg and Gale, I was in a restaurant. It was a very groovy restaurant, and it was in Bondi, and it was the 90s. And this woman walked in, and the whole restaurant just kind of turned because she had this most extraordinary presence. And Megan wasn't even famous then. She was famous perhaps in Italy, but she wasn't famous in Australia, but there was something about her. And I've seen lots of famous people walk into rooms, and it's not like that with all of them. I've seen lots of beautiful women walk into rooms as well, and it's not like that with all of them. But there's something about Megan, she's just got it. It's like an energy. Since then, of course, Megan Gale has become one of the most recognisable women in Australia. At first it was as a model, and then it was ambassadorships for big brands like David Jones, for whom she walked the catwalk and appeared in all their ad campaigns for many, many years. She's also had some crushing career disappointments, some incredible highs, both personally and professionally. And through it all, her relationships with a couple of high-profile men have been very widely and not always fairly covered by the gossip media. Today, Megan is 45. She's engaged to her partner, former AFL player Shaun Hampson, who you may also have fallen in love with when he was on Survivor last year. I know I did. They have 2 little kids together, River and Rosie. And Megan's a lady startup. Last year, she launched a range of kids and baby skincare products called Mindful Life. And as you'll hear in this interview, she's really found her voice. Your fame in Italy was literally overnight. Can you just explain that for people who don't know?
Yeah, so I'd been modelling for a good 5 years, and I was in the process of considering giving it up. I'd been modelling just in Australia. I'd never been overseas. I got a little bit of work, but I wasn't a household name. My career wasn't really going gangbusters. So I thought,
for people who weren't alive or were maybe young back then, can you explain the aesthetic and the reason that you weren't getting much work?
Sure. And of course, this is before social media and all of that. So back then, the kind of model of the moment was Kate Moss. It was that heroin chic, and, you know, you had to be...
Grunge.
Yeah, grunge. And I so didn't fit that mould. I just kind of missed the boat of the tall, athletic, curvier model. And so, yeah, I just didn't fit the mould. So I found it very hard to get work. And I thought to myself, well, look, it's just... And typically back then too, you know, by the age of 22, 23, your modelling career was pretty much done and dusted.
Pretty old at that stage.
Exactly. And the chances of it taking off early to mid-20s was slim to none. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I should focus on TV commercials because that's where the bucks were. Put some money in the bank and then think about what do we do next. So I did a TV commercial for Clio. I did a TV commercial for Dove chocolate. So my little plan was going well. This was the last year I was going to model. And then the third TV commercial I got was for an Italian telephone company, which I thought would never see the light of day. They were casting it here in Sydney purely just because they were shooting it here because the director was Australian and he wanted to shoot here. I got the job.
Because you look Italian? You do look Italian.
I do. Well, see, because I know I'm half Maori, so I think I look Islander.
Oh, I never knew that. So you could, but you could pass for Italian or European in some way.
Possibly. And I don't think
Brazilian.
They were trying to find an Italian-looking girl. I think they just wanted someone that was quite tall, a bit exotic, and maybe could look a bit mysterious because I was playing a spy in this commercial. Anyway, like a Bond girl. Anyway, it aired in Italy, which I knew about but didn't really know much about the reaction until my manager at the time got a phone call from the client saying, we want to fly her over here because everyone wants to meet her and wants to know who she is because the commercial's doing really well and we actually want to do another commercial with Megan. And so it just took off. So they flew me over to Italy. I'd never been to Europe. And as soon as I landed at the airport, I had the custom guards who were coming out wanting to take a photo with me and sign an autograph, which I'd never done. So that was the beginning of it all. So it was pretty crazy.
But why would an ad – I'm trying to think of a modern comparison. Like, why did this ad send them all insane? Like, what was it? Like, there was no nudity in it. It was not –
No. Oh, it was pretty buxom in the ad. There was I've been told there's a point, you have to Google the ad, Mia. So there's a point where you probably still scratch your head because I'm still scratching my head. There's a slow motion part where I rise out of the car, and apparently it was that kind of moment. I guess, there is a comparison. Do you remember when Elle Macpherson did the Tab ad and she walked out of the ocean, and that was kind of her moment, but it was here in Australia.
Or Tonya Bird did the Ants Pants commercial with the echidna eating the ants off her.
Correct. So it was kind of my version of that for that market.
Uh-huh.
And I think back then you could become famous or well known, or you have those moments in your career where it's like, okay, that's your pivot point, and that was mine. And so and it was unexpected and it happened very organically. But if that hadn't happened, the rest of my career probably wouldn't have happened.
When did you decide to move over there?
I think I decided to move over there. I mean, I never really moved there permanently. I think the most amount of time I ever spent there was probably about 4 or 5 months at a time, because I then started to get work back in Australia. So I'd have to come, like every 3 or 4 months I'd have to come back home for David Jones or whatever it was. So I kind of just flitted between the two. But I think I started to spend more time there because once I got the second commercial with the company, then I ended up doing commercials for them for 7 years, and then had other work springboard off of that. I did 3 movies there. A lot of work came from that, and then of course that had a ripple effect back home. So I had to keep going between the two because, as I said, my career wasn't doing too well, and finally it was. So it was like, okay, we got to make hay while the sun shines. So I just churned it out.
Was it a problem that you couldn't speak Italian?
Initially, no. They didn't seem too fussed. If I had to do interviews, they would have a translator for me. Especially on TV, they just put a translator little thing in my ear and I could hear everything. But I not long, I think about 18 months, 2 years after I'd been going over there and was spending more time there, I acquired an Italian boyfriend and he taught me Italian.
Yeah, that's how I learned when I lived there. I had an Italian boyfriend. I learned to swear very well.
Yeah, you learn those words first. Isn't that funny? But I ended up pretty much not having any kind of formal lessons. I just learned, and I had Italian friends, and they all helped me. And it was literally just almost overnight. I just went from struggling with it to kind of slipping into it. And I can now probably speak it now better now than when I was there.
It seems like you entered that phase of your career quite quickly, in terms of you went to Italy as a celebrity, not as a sort of a struggling model. It was a time before Me Too, but, I've also lived in Italy. Things can be fairly loose. Was it ever Italian men, they love women. Like, they love women. They're
so loose. And the women don't seem to mind.
No.
In fact, they quite expect it.
You've never felt so hot than when you're in Italy, I think. Like, they just love women. But were there ever, do you think that your kind of fame and status protected you from any sort of difficult situations when you were modelling
my
back
first
then?
trip there, I had a very big Me Too moment. I think my lack of understanding of the culture, the language, my vulnerability of being thrust. So I did that first trip over there, and the client had organised a week full of commitments because, they were like, okay, let's just maximise this our new, I guess, ambassador is hot property right now. So let's just run with this. So they booked me in. I attended their version of the Logies. I was doing magazine, newspaper interviews, and I had never been on like a press junket or a PR tour. Like, I didn't know what in Australia, let alone in a country I couldn't understand what the hell was going on. So I was just finding my way as well, whilst trying to understand what the hell was going on around me. So I was doing all of these commitments, and they'd organised a shoot for me for a men's magazine, which I didn't know it was a men's magazine. I was just rocking up to stuff because each commitment to the next was completely different. So I went to it. They kind of described to me what I could understand. They wanted it to be, a bit of a sexy shoot and a bit fun and a bit. So I thought, yep, that's okay. I can churn that out. And then I was on set, and the photographer was basically, in a nutshell, just trying to get me to get my gear off. I kept saying, no, I don't want to. I'm not comfortable. And you think about the language barrier and trying to navigate. And then I was young as well.
Yeah.
First time in this situation. And I was saying, no, I'm not comfortable with this. And, he kept sort of trying to get the stylist to pull down my straps and trying to make it look like I was nude. And I just sensed that I was just in a situation where I was, quite out of my depth, not comfortable at all. I ended up bursting into tears. I couldn't, and then and this is where this sort of, and we hear it a lot with these kind of situations. So no one, actually, I probably shouldn't have said it was my own Me Too thing, but it was just that kind of.
Well, it was.
Sexual.
It was. Harassment.
Yeah, but what I find interesting is where we find out, because you hear like, well, how come you didn't say anything, and how come, I understand, because especially when you're young and you're naive, you're like, am I just being a prude?
Yeah.
Is this normal? Am I overreacting? Am I being precious, or am I actually onto something? This is actually not good, proper behaviour in the workplace. Am I well within my rights? And then my reaction was just to burst into tears, and then they were just, oh, geez, this is hopeless. And
this isn't sexy.
Well, no, and in fact the shoot got called off. We had probably only 2 images. I think we were meant to get like 6. And luckily there was a woman on set who was there who worked with the phone company, and she was lovely, and she was a mum, and she said to me, come on, let's go. And she took me to her house and gave me ice cream and said, look, it's okay. It's, that was not what we expected this shoot to be, and I'm so sorry you've had this experience. Yeah, it was not great at all.
When you're going through your teens and then your early 20s, we've all got, as women, so much insecurity. When your actual job is based on how you look and what you weigh and all of those things, how do you manage that, like in your head? It's hard enough for those of us who aren't paid because of how we look. But when you explicitly, the value proposition is, we are hiring you because of this.
Yeah. I think in one sense it was probably a blessing that I didn't really start modelling until I was like 18, 19. But even then I think my weight was perfectly fine. But I was never put in a position where my agency said, look, you're a bit fat, lose weight. It was never ever said. But I think it was kind of pitched into me and worded in a way of, you've got so much potential, and there are a lot of clients that want to use you.
Ooh,
but if you just kind of lost a little bit.
Yeah.
So
that's insidious,
it was never,
it?
Yeah.
You've
so
got
it was
so much
never
potential
really,
if only you were thinner.
Kind of. And I remember my agency not kind of being too manipulative about it. They were almost a bit like, oh, we're sorry, this is the way it is, but this is the feedback we're getting. So they were more like the messenger, if you will. But I never kind of buckled to that pressure, and I'm so glad I didn't.
How didn't you?
I don't know. I just held strong. And I kind of backed myself in, and my instincts always kind of told, because I'd often have my parents, who obviously as parents they're very caring, but like, there's too much pressure on you to try and be who they want you to be in order to be successful, and it's not working. So maybe think about another career. And I just knew in my bones that it would happen one day. I just knew. I knew it would. If I just hung in there, the right job and the right thing would come, because I just always knew it. So I wanted to just back myself in and wait for that. With me, I feel like when I've done something, I need to move on to something else. When I've exhausted it, like that's, I walked on the catwalk for so many years for David Jones, and I loved it and really relished that role. But after a while, I was like, this is starting to feel like Groundhog Day, and I don't want to be still up here at 45, even if I can, with no other strings to my bow, with it just constantly being churned out. And I thought, no, I want to, end when I want to high, and know when it's time to kind of step back and move into something else. So that was probably why as well that going down that path probably appealed to me.
When things started to wind down, you left David Jones or finished your ambassadorship with them, and you were going to become an actress. You'd done 3 movies already in Italy. In Italian?
A couple of them were, yeah.
Wow. And then you were going to go, I imagine the audition process was hectic, and you got the role of Wonder Woman in a 3-part
It wasn't
deal.
that hectic.
Really?
No. I got asked to audition for it. So
did you want to be an actress? Did you think, okay, that's what's going to be next?
It was really quite serendipitous how it happened, because I was still working for David Jones. I was still on the catwalk and doing the campaigns, and I'd had a chat to them and said, look, I'm still keen to keep working together, but there's other things I want to do as well, and I want to explore that. And acting was one of them. So I was literally in the process of getting together any work I'd done on TV, anything that could form some semblance of a show reel, so that I could then start going to agencies and start that whole process and open up that world. Whilst I was doing that, my manager at the time got a phone call from Guy Barrett casting agency, who said, we've had a request for Megan to come in and put down a part for a movie. They didn't tell me what it was. They just sent through some different sides of different movies, and we had to pick a scene to do. And then that was all I was told. So I was like, wow, this is a sign. And I told you, like, I always look out for signs. So I was like, okay, this is meant to be. So, and I'd always loved Wonder Woman, PS, growing up, and people had always told me that when I was growing up that I looked like Linda Carter, and so I always had a thing for Wonder Woman. And when I went in there, they said to me, look, confidentially, you're reading for the role of Wonder Woman. I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, George Miller's doing a film, and he's I think he was aware of who I was, knew that I kind of physically fit the part. So, and they'd been trying to cast for her and hadn't found the right person. So they asked me to go in and read for it. I did the audition. It was horrific. I was so nervous. As soon as they told me what it was for, it was inexperienced. And I just completely bombed it. And then I went away, and George Miller only told me this later, but he saw my audition tape and took it to Warner Brothers and said, look, we auditioned this girl. She looks the part, but I don't think she's got the chops to carry it. And they said, you have to go back and work with her. That's Wonder Woman. And so he came back to Australia and said, look, we want Megan to come in and do some workshops with us. And they had another actor in to help me work with, and he recorded some more scenes with me in his studio and took it back to Warner Brothers, and he was happy with it. So that was my process, and then I got cast.
And then what happened? And
then so we started pre-production, and then they flew all the cast down to Australia, very top secret. We all were sitting there working, we were training. I had a full costume made, got flown to New Zealand for my costume fitting. And then the writer's strike happened in the beginning of 2008. Yeah, so having been cast, I had to sign for a 3-picture deal, which was great.
Sure, no worries.
But in turn, I went to Warner Brothers, went to David Jones, and I said, hey, I said I was going to pursue other things. It's kind of happened now, and I have to leave you guys, unfortunately, because I've just signed this 3-picture deal, and they were a bit disappointed, but they completely understood. And so then the writer's strike ended up happening. Long story short, the movie was shelved, and then I had no David Jones. I know. But fortunately, they said, look, we'd still love to work with you in some capacity and have you be our brand ambassador. So I just worked on other things outside of the catwalk. As I said, I'd felt that had run its course anyway. So it all happens for a reason. But yeah, the film that never happened.
Did that make you just go, I mean, you obviously just didn't keep pursuing acting. It didn't awaken a bug in you. It was more just that role you felt that you were destined to play.
No, it had awoken a bug in me for sure, and I still wanted to pursue it. But at the same time, I was very realistic of the fact that I was 33 years old, had no experience. I still had a lot of offers for work back here in Australia. And I thought I have 2 options. I can either say no to all of that financial stability and security with a career here in Australia, and at 33 go and camp out in LA along with all the other hopefuls and hope something happens, or I stay here, I keep exploring what I'm doing, and if the acting thing happens organically and in its own way, then it does. And I did go to LA for a few trips, and it's funny too, as soon as I got signed as Wonder Woman, I had I don't even know how to this day, how they got my email address. I had CAA, William Morris,
All the big agents.
All the big agents, they all emailed me wanting to represent. So I went over there and met with all of them. It was a whole other weird little pocket in my life, and going through that process, like people were sending me courtside tickets to the Lakers and just madness. But then as soon as the film got shelved, I was invisible.
I'd forgotten until I was reading an interview you did with the Women's Weekly that you even went out with Andy Lee from Hamish and Andy.
You forgot?
I totally forgot.
Wow.
I see you as, I don't know, it's just like that was like a different phase of your life. Like I see you so entrenched now with Shaun and your kids.
Kids will do that.
Yeah, kids, and maybe because I just watched Survivor.
Yeah. Oh, did you watch it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was the first season I'd ever watched.
Really?
Yes. And
do you love it now?
I love it now.
Yeah.
And I love him now, and I understand you and him now.
A lot of people have come to that realisation, like, I get it.
Because the whole trope at the start was awfully sexist, like cougar and toy
Mia.
boy.
Oh, Mia.
I really
Don't get me started.
I really felt for you at that time because you were just
very demeaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like mommy blogger.
Well, I mean, I get how it happens. I don't like it. I don't accept it. I really found it to be it was really challenging to navigate through there for a while, because I think as well, I mean, look, I get when you're in the public eye, you've got to kind of just accept the fact that you're going to be exposed to a lot of curiosity and being put under a microscope and a lot of judgment, but that doesn't mean you have to like it. Because
Or accept it.
And I think, it really, it wasn't a good time. I found that I almost felt like I'd done something wrong and I was tarnished somehow because, when I was with Andy, it was everyone loved us together. And it was
that was like the mainstreaming of you, I think, in a way, because you were always so beautiful but kind of untouchable, and then you were going out with like everybody's larrikin kind of brother. It was like, those two have such a strong brand in mainstream ordinary blokiness.
Yep.
And that kind of humanised you and mainstreamed you. And then the perception that you, and I have no idea how that relationship ended, but the perception then was that you broke his heart and moved on.
It was, I think, as well, because, even though I'm a public person, I call myself a private public person, because some people are public and they love being public and they love going to events and they love being on red carpets and more. I'm very much a reluctant celebrity in that I didn't do this to be famous. I pursued modelling because I really was just tenacious and driven and I wanted to get there. Yeah, I just wanted to be good at what I did and be acknowledged for it by my peers in the industry. I didn't want to be famous from it. And I could have walked away, but it was like, my God, I've worked so hard to be successful.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a position where I can do what I love every day. So I kind of that was more of a driver for me. I think, again, going back to being a very private public person, and Andy was too to a degree, we sort of were going through what we were going through very privately and for quite a while. And so when people found out we were broken up, I think it came as a bit of a shock, and I guess I did appear to have moved on relatively quickly, but
who gets to choose?
Exactly. And I think for me, you have two options, and at that time you're kind of like, if I think I've met the one, should I just say, can you hang off for 6 months until it's deemed appropriate by Australia, and then we can start dating?
And also I imagine any relationship, by the time people find out that it's over, it's a process,
Correct.
It's been a long time to get to that over point. So
new for other people, but quite old for us. So, but again, I get how things are perceived versus what the reality is, but at the same time you're trying to sort of navigate through a new relationship and hopefully that person's not getting scared off because they're not used to being in the public eye. But I knew in my bones how special this was going to be.
How?
And
how did you know?
I felt it. Just felt it in my, as I say, in my bones. Like I was like, that's the father of my children. That's the one.
It's hard to explain. I felt that too when I met my husband, but it's hard to explain that to people
who haven't felt
it.
Yeah,
or they feel
it differently.
Really corny.
Completely.
Because it's not love at first sight. It's more like a familiarity or a recognition or something. It's very quiet. It's not, for me, it wasn't.
Not some big grand moment, no.
No, it was more just like, right.
Yeah.
He's the one.
Yeah. And for me it was it was a bit like that too. It was just a knowing and feeling very, very secure in that. But when you've kind of got all this toy boy, cougar, and what really I guess aggravated me about it was because I knew that if he was 12 years older than me, it wouldn't have been a problem, but because I was the woman and I was older, it made it somehow a bit salacious. Yeah, but I kind of, that's why I was so thrilled that he did survive it, because I knew that, because when you're an athlete too, a professional athlete, you often aren't allowed, especially when you're in a team sport, you don't get too much of an insight into who that person is. They're just kind of a cog in a machine. And so no one really knew what Shaun was like and how amazing he was. And I knew that when he did Survivor, people would see that.
What's it like being followed by the paparazzi?
I don't see myself as particularly extraordinary at the end of the day. I just see myself as a woman and I'm being followed by a man I don't know. That's the most basic facts of what that is. And when someone is following you constantly and running through red lights and trying to, shoving cameras and popping out and, startling your children, I find it very aggressive and I find it very confronting, and there's a lot of elements of being in the public eye that I've gotten used to. I've never gotten used to that.
You had a swimwear line.
I did.
I owned a number of Isola bikinis. Isola.
They were damn good bikinis.
They were damn good swimsuits.
Yeah.
I believe you partnered with a swimsuit company. Mm-hmm. They were brilliant swimsuits. I owned many of them. And then that business folded.
Mm-hmm. The business didn't fold. They rebranded it.
That must have been devastating.
Yep.
What happened?
I don't know. I was left completely out of that.
Was that not your business?
Partially.
When it came to launching Mindful Life, did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was that about having control? Where did the idea come from?
I think after having a couple of unsavoury business ventures, ones that went well, but I guess what I learned from partnering with other people was that ultimately you can put in all that hard work, effort, your name, your brand, your likeness, everything. Ultimately, if someone else holds control, it means nothing.
And that happened to Elle Macpherson, didn't it, as well?
I'm not sure.
Well, she had this similar thing with Elle Macpherson for Bend On, and then he just went, you know what, it's now going to be called Heidi Klum for Bend On.
Right. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's what happening, because the more common business model and path for someone like myself with a company is that you get a licensing agreement, and you might get in exchange for handing over your name, that they'll create the infrastructure, fund it, make a product for you, you work on it with them, have a bit of creative license if you're lucky, and you'll get paid in royalties. You might get a share of the business as well, depending on how good your manager is that negotiates that, or your lawyer. And look, that's certainly not a bad way to go. And the plus side of that is you're at zero risk financially. Everything's just laid on, and the work is as much or as little as you want it to be or you negotiate it to be. But ultimately, like we just said, if they decide that they want to do something else with it, or they want to boot you out because you've helped them build it now, so thanks, we've used you, we're going to do this now, you have no say because they have majority control. So that for me even more reinforced it, and it was a hard way to go, okay, I'm going to do my own thing now. Okay, but that requires self-funding. That requires me building it from the ground up with no help. And it is absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done.
It is, isn't it?
But it's mine.
It's your hard.
It's mine. And if it's successful, it's mine. If it folds, it's on me. That's fine. But I make the decisions of how it folds, when it folds, but at least it's mine and I'm not answerable to anyone else. I mean, it comes with a lot more weight and responsibility and risk, and all of that is scary as heck. But every time it does overwhelm me and challenge me and make me, I mean, in the last 6 weeks alone, I've just been challenged like you wouldn't even imagine. I've just been sobbing to Shaun going, I can't do this. This is just, I've had enough.
That's called the deep trough of pain.
Is it?
Yeah.
I live there
Yeah.
heaps.
Yeah, we all do. So when you own your own business.
But I'm mindful enough to know I'm there and I can
The key to surviving the deep trough of pain I've learned over the years is by being mindful and saying, this is the deep trough of pain.
Yeah.
Shaun, I'm in the deep trough of pain. And he's like,
the trenches. I call it the trenches.
You're in the deep trough of pain and you will come out of it.
Yeah.
And then you will go back into it.
Okay, yeah.
But it's like you just got to see it as a temporary trough that you've fallen into but that you will climb out of.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes acknowledging it, because the fear is I'm never going to get out of it and this is just where it ends.
Yeah.
You almost always do. But there are just so many moments where you're just like, I'm in the deep trough.
Yeah, and I'm okay with being there. It's just when I'm there for a sustained period that I just go, okay. And it's really hard because you want to, don't know if you're wanting to just go, okay, tools down, this is it, I'm done. You don't know if you're operating from fear or actual there's something in you just that's going, this is a sign, get out. It's very hard to know the difference between the two. And I don't give up too easily to the point that, I don't want to do it to the point where I'm being silly and and reckless. But by the same token, I hear what you're saying, and I just think I think it's very, very good advice to kind of understand that you can be there for a bit, but you've got to almost see it as a separate thing and not get consumed by it.
The idea of mindful life, I've heard you talk about how when your kids were little, people would stop you and say, well, they still are little.
More river.
And say, what would they say?
They would come to me and this is when I was in the initial planning stage of I want to do this product range. Mums that had kids in their teens and 20s would come and say to me, don't wish this early stage away. I know newborn age is hard, but it goes by in a flash. My kids are in their 20s and I never see them because they're always with their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their friends, and I just really wish I could get that time back. And that's what really – I was looking for a why of the business. What's my message? What's my purpose? And that just kept coming to me. It kept happening again and again and again, and even my own mum would say it, and I thought, okay, there's something in this. And that's when I kind of started to shift the focus more from an emotive standpoint of I want to share this with other parents. And these products, okay, they're gentle and they're safe and they've got no nasties and they're wondrous, should be by the by for baby products, I think, just putting it out there. But it's less about that and it's more about what they represent and wanting them to represent this time of day and people to use them as tools to create these little moments and rituals. And that's where the whole mindfulness came in, which I think people often confuse that with, alternative, hippie, and it can be that. But it is quite simply just about being present and aware. And I wanted to remind people of that messaging because I had parents coming up to me and I found it so just enlightening to kind of go, I am rushing through it. I'm rushing through bed and bath and wishing this newborn phase away because it's hard and it's crap and it's actually where the magic is.
I miss that time.
I do too. That's where you go like, should I have another one?
Should you have another one?
I would, oh God, I just wish I'd started earlier. I'm 45 this year and I know that doesn't mean it's impossible.
It's hard. 45 is hard.
It is.
It's true.
Hard. You don't have as much pep in your step at 45. You just get over stuff.
I know you're not meant to ask people like, are you done? But I'm constantly fascinated. I'm constantly asking women.
Yeah, I get asked
Are you done? Are you done? Do you think you're done? Do you think you're done? Because I'm just so interested in that.
People forget I'm 45. People are like, you can have another one. It's like, do you know my age?
I thought you were like 39.
No, I had River when I was 39.
And I know other couples with big age gaps where they say they've worked out that the person who's older will probably have to do everything a bit later than they would like, and the person who's younger will probably have to do everything a bit earlier than they thought,
Correct.
And that's the compromise. But the one thing that there's not a lot of wriggle room around is fertility, is there? I mean, if you're using your own eggs, presumably.
Yeah, that's it. But look, I think I'm more just – I'm happy being done because I've got two beautiful, healthy kids. I'm blessed that I've got one of each, so I've got that. We get to experience that. But I just loved being pregnant, and I even loved the birthing process and going through all those phases. And it's very hard for me to wrap my head around the fact, like, we're done now.
Was the second pregnancy because you had a miscarriage between River and Rosie?
Yep.
Was the second pregnancy a different experience for that reason?
You mean, was it a little bit more more worry and concern
Yeah, I think
surrounding
pregnancy
it.
after miscarriage is very different to pregnancy before miscarriage. Or it was for me. Did you find that? I was much more nervy. It was a mental battle for me as much as a physical one.
I think I was up until that 6-week scan, and then I was fine. But I was also very conscious of saying to myself, that was that experience, that was that pregnancy. Plenty, and I have an amazing obstetrician who was like, don't even for a second think that this is going to end up like that. This is a clean slate, new pregnancy. Most women can go on and have a healthy pregnancy after a miscarriage. And so in my mindset, I was very much knowing that I would be doing a disservice to myself and my body if I let my stress levels and my concerns get to a point where I'd be constantly worried that I was going to miscarriage. I would probably miscarry if I was worried. So I just relaxed and went with it. And I also, as horrible as an experience as miscarriage is, I think I was ultimately thankful that my body knew that it wasn't right and it wasn't meant to be, and just respected that that's the way that my body decided to deal with that, and that it acknowledged it early on in the piece.
Was it early in the pregnancy?
It was 9 weeks, yeah.
Still hard, isn't it?
It's hard. It's not nice.
Yeah,
and
it's like you're grieving an idea.
Yeah.
You're grieving a future that you kind of had started already to plan for and imagine.
Yeah. And then not just that, they're going through that grieving process and you know how heartbreaking it is, but then even just going through, there's a woman going through the physical side of it too. It's just a bit, it's one of those things when you're in the public eye, I remember sitting there getting ready for the procedure, and I had a lady saying to me, oh, you live in the area near me. Do you know where there is a good place to go get a good spray tan? Oh, God. I'm about to have a
Curette.
Like,
yeah. Hi.
Hang
on. Let me just.
You're just.
Let me airdrop a pin to you.
I can't wait to tell my daughter that I met you today. Really? Are we discussing that out of school? Are we? I couldn't even speak. I was so.
You must have felt so vulnerable.
Vulnerable and shocked. And like, okay, you're going to discuss this over dinner with your mates?
Yeah.
Like,
because of course. Guess who we're going in today.
Exactly.
Because it's not like you'd announced it.
No.
Wasn't it
not at all.
Years later that you spoke about it, right?
No, I actually spoke about it, I think it was about 6 months later.
Yeah, right.
Because I was in the middle of filming Australia's Next Top Model at the time, and I had to actually fly to Sydney that night and go to film an episode, and then the next day go to Italy to film a very big episode. So I had no time to just sort of stop and process. And I wasn't ready to talk about it publicly. I didn't even know if I ever would talk about it publicly. It was so fresh. And so for someone to kind of acknowledge me, know who I was, knew where I lived, and that she was going to tell her daughter that she met me, and her daughter obviously knows what her mum does for a living. So I was that just added to the ball of emotions, crazy emotions swirling at the time. So, yeah, fun times.
As a private public person, how do you and Shaun, especially now after Survivor, because his level of celebrity.
He's got his own little fan base happening.
He sure must. And that must be lovely for you, but it also must have amplified your joint celebrity, and you're both incredibly tall, incredibly beautiful people. It's not like you can discreetly just like walk into a shop or a restaurant.
Especially not with him. It's just like a beacon.
Yeah.
Hot beacon.
A very hot beacon.
Very hot beacon.
How do you draw a boundary around your privacy and your family, both in your public life just out in the world and also just, you know, the social media world that we now live in as well?
He's pretty low key just generally, and he's not too active on social media. I think he always means to be, but he's just kind of like
men are lurkers. They're never active on
social. And I'll be honest with you, especially since the last 6 months since he's come off Survivor, we've both been so busy with our respective businesses that we just work and we are with our kids. We're very boring right now.
What is he doing now?
So he bought into a partnership into a cafe in Melbourne. That was back in 2017. And then after he retired, he sunk himself into it a bit more, and then they've now got a liquor license. Then we're doing renovations, so we're going to open in the evenings. So he's he oversees a lot of that and is quite consumed with that. And so because we work quite steadily, both of us, that we just want any other time we've got, it's just with the kids. So we aren't really in situations too often where we have to navigate it a lot. Yeah, we find it fairly easy to navigate.
You both reached the top of your respective careers, which is what makes this next chapter so interesting to watch for both of you. I think Mindful Life I can just see how big this brand can get. Like it
has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
It's just all down to me and how I navigate it, because I could give it such a great future and expand it in the way I want to, but I'm still learning how to navigate a business. So hopefully I'll make the right choices and it will get to where I want it to get to.
I'm very confident of that. I don't think you would ever do anything.
Not intentionally.
Just get you out of that deep trough of pain.
Get out of the deep trough of pain, love, and then off I go. And then I'll probably roll into it again at some point. But I think as long as I know how to get myself out, that's the key.
Stay mindful.
Stay mindful, babe.
There's Megan. If you want to find out more about her business, Mindful Life, you can follow the brand on social media at Mindful Life or go to themindfullife.com. Thanks for listening to No Filter this week. Next week, I love this episode. We're going to go deep into the drama of perimenopause with Dr. Ginni Mansberg. If you're a woman who is, well, any age really, it's coming for all of us. I'm in the thick of it, and my conversation with Ginni is just so enlightening. Make sure you don't miss that next week. And if you're looking for something else to warm your ears until I'm back in them with the next episode of No Filter, you really need to listen to Eligible. It's our new podcast that is, I guess you could say it's about love at first sound, because if you're single or if you're just interested in perving on the lives of single people, you'll probably be very sick of the apps and sick of that kind of superficial swipe culture. So at Mamma Mia, we wanted to do something a bit different, and we wanted to give someone the chance for you to hear them before you actually got to see what they look like. So every week, Rachel Corbett interviews, a man, might be a man, might be a woman. What they've got to have in common is they've got to want to date women, because it's a podcast for, women. So we've had Nick, we've had Bushra, we've had a range of ages, sexualities, and it's just so interesting. And then after you listen to them being interviewed, a code word is given, and then you can go onto Mamma Mia and you can see what they look like, and you can find out how to get in touch if you want to. It's not just for single people. I'm very much not single, but this has become my favourite podcast in just 2 weeks. So have a listen to Eligible wherever you get your podcasts, and I will be in your ears next week.